Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bug a Scientist here with Imagination Station. My name is Caitlin Carter, and today I have the honor of introducing you to two local entomologists, Dr. Jack Schultz and Dr. Heidi Apple from the University of Toledo. And today they are going to be sharing all about the universe of insects versus plants. So without further ado, Heidi and Jack, take it away.
Hi, I'm Heidi.
And I'm Jack, and we are entomologists.
We love insects.
And we spend a lot of our time watching them and collecting them and studying them.
And as many as half of all kinds of insects eat plants. And we call those insect herbivores, kind of like we call humans eating only plants vegetarians. Today we're going to talk about how herbivores and plants duke it out. This contest between insects and plants has been going on for a very long time.
In fact, insects began eating plants almost as soon as plants arrived on the land, on the earth. That's over 300 million years ago. And insects are present right from the start. In fact, there were predators as well. You can see here a dragonfly with a wingspan of about 2 feet.
Whoa!
Yeah, so insects were there from the start, and you can see their damage in fossils from all of these eras. It's really cool to see the holes in the leaves. Now, since then, insects have really only been eating about 10% of all the plants on the planet. Now, considering how much insects can reproduce, how many there can be, that doesn't seem like very much. So there must be some explanation about what keeps insects from consuming more of our green planet.
Well, that's partly because plants defend themselves. Take a look at these physical defenses.
What do you mean, defend?
Look at these thorns, spines, and hairs.
Yeah, but I don't think those little aphids care much.
No, they don't, because they can avoid it by going between them.
Sure.
But most plant defense is invisible to us. It's chemistry. And yet this chemistry is very familiar to us. We have aspirin, which comes from willow. We have nicotine, which comes from tobacco. We have caffeine, which comes from the coffee plant. We have red wine, and those anthocyanins come from plants.
And tannins. It can't be great wine without tannins.
That's right. And down in the right-hand corner is some turmeric. Almost all of the herbs and spices we use as humans and for flavoring and also as natural medicines come from plants. And if there hadn't been this war between plants and insects, we might not have any of these things that we've grown so accustomed to.
A world without pepper?
Indeed.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, insects. That's really a great contribution. So it's mostly invisible, and you say chemical?
Yes.
All right, well, some plants we know are really poisonous. And here's one that I'll bet nobody in our audience is going to go out and bite anytime soon. This milkweed plant is loaded with all kinds of nasty chemicals that cause heart attacks, that cause all sorts of terrible symptoms if you were to eat it. And yet, we know that there are plenty of insects that eat this plant. In fact, plenty of insects that specialize on this plant. All of the 6 insect species we see here feed almost exclusively, if not exclusively, on milkweed. And they can do that because over evolutionary time they've developed enzyme systems and other physiological tricks that allow them to consume the nasty chemistry of milkweeds and disarm it, or store it, or expel it. The store it part of it is really kind of interesting. If you look carefully here, in fact, you don't have to look carefully, you should notice that all of these insects are brightly colored. There's a lot of orange here, a lot of yellow, white, black, stripes, and so forth. And the reason for that is that each of these species is able to take the chemistry of the plant and store it in its body, and that makes the insect as distasteful and as poisonous as the plant. Scientists demonstrated this by feeding some of these insects to blue jays, and were able to show that blue jays will vomit if they eat only 1 or 2 of these insects.
Ew.
Yeah, that's a sad blue jay there. But that's an important lesson for that blue jay. In nature, a bird like a blue jay or any other bird that tries one of those insects will learn almost immediately never to touch one again, and that learning will be strengthened by the association between the taste and the vomiting and the color. So you won't see many birds chasing monarch butterflies around on milkweed plants. Now, this is a war that goes back and forth. And so all through evolution, plants have been developing new defenses to try to beat the insects. And here's one. You probably know this, but if you break a leaf of a milkweed plant, a little white latex comes out. It's sticky, gooey material. And an insect that bites the leaf gets a mouthful of this glue and can't move its mouth parts anymore and can't feed. This latex, as we call it, is under pressure. So whenever the insect cuts the plant, or especially a vein in the plant squeezes the latex out, just like out of a toothpaste tube, and into the face of the insect. Well, insects are not to be deterred. So just relatively recently, scientists discovered that they have a way of dealing with this as well. And it's called trenching. In each of these pictures, an insect is feeding on a plant leaf and is cutting the line between the plant and the leaf tissue. So the beetle in the upper left-hand corner is cutting through the main vein on a leaf. And although latex will leak out there, beyond that cut, latex can't squirt out anymore. He's cut off the river. And the monarch butterfly caterpillar, the lower left-hand corner, is doing the same. And the really cool one is the baby monarch on the right that has cut the veins in a circle and then feeds in the middle of the circle because latex can't get in there.
Oh, very cool.
Isn't that something? Yeah. So not only do insects deal with plant defenses sort of biochemically by detoxifying or storing the chemistry, they also have behavioral tricks they can play to keep the plant from winning the battle.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Isn't this a poisonous plant?
It is, in a way. It's a tomato plant.
Yeah.
And it's poisonous to a lot of insects that aren't adapted to feed on it.
I kind of suspect that if I ate the leaves, it wouldn't be a happy thing.
No, and it wouldn't taste so well.
You know, the original tomato, before we used it for agriculture, was only about the size of a nickel and was totally poisonous,
Wow.
protected against insects.
So for many of the plants we've come to cultivate as food, we've bred a lot of this defense chemistry out of it and made them pretty untoxic.
Right. Mm-hmm. So do you have any friends with you here?
I do, but maybe one thing I wanted to point out about the tomato plant is that it has some hairs on it.
Oh, yeah. Let me
Take a
see
look.
here.
Can you see? Some.
I can. Little hairs all over it. Those
Yeah.
hairs are called trichomes. And they look something like this on the left. See, some of them are little spikes, but others have these bulbs on the end, and those bulbs are full of nasty toxic chemicals. And when an insect bumps them, they break open, spreading the toxic chemistry all over the insect. And you can see an aphid on the right has run afoul of the trichomes on a plant, and is sort of getting engulfed with sticky goo, and won't be able to feed successfully on the plant.
Wow, so this is one case where a smaller insect can't evade
Right.
the defenses, but
Right.
maybe an even smaller one might.
Oh, yeah, possibly. I suppose mites get between them. I don't know. But if that cactus you showed the picture of had these going between the spines, it might be better off.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, there are some cacti that have tiny little spines.
That's right, yep.
So maybe that's why.
The ones I always get in my finger.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And you asked me about whether I had
Some friends on here.
Some friends on here. So we do have some friends on this tomato plant, and I'm wondering if the audience can see.
It's curled up on the other side. Oh,
I'm going
there
to
he
turn
is.
it back. Can you see? This is a tobacco hornworm on the plant.
I think anybody who gardens with tomatoes has seen these.
I bet you have, and it's the the worst pest you can have on your tomato plant because it can eat your tomato plant in a day or two, right down to the nubbins. And that's because this insect has evolved tolerance to the chemical defenses in tomato. And so it eats it with abandon. But other insects are deterred from feeding.
In your garden, you may have seen the larger version of that caterpillar. They get really big, and as Heidi says, they can eat your entire tomato plant in a couple of days.
And you can see on there, see the little holes, ovals along the length of the body? Those are the openings through which insects breathe, the spiracles we talked about in our first talk.
Right, right. Now, a lot of people don't like the look of caterpillars. I find this one actually really very pleasing, I especially like its blue horn.
It looks like an overstuffed sofa.
Yeah, I guess it
stage.
does, yeah, or a puffy coat.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what the horn is for. Some caterpillars can wiggle it, but we really don't have any idea what the horn on a hornworm does.
Huh. It makes it easier to pick them up. If
Yeah,
that's what you
right,
want to
yeah,
do.
right, yeah.
But I'm sure that's not
No.
how they evolved.
I don't
But they
think they were
turn
designed
into
for that.
something beautiful, don't
They do. This is the adult of the tomato hornworm, and I think you'd have to agree it's a lovely moth. You might find this, especially if you have a tomato garden, you might find these later in the summer at your house lights. They're beautiful, and they pollinate plants. So they provide a significant benefit. And this is a common theme we see where some insects aren't so good for what the humans would like to see happen, and others are very beneficial. And this is a case in which in the same species, we have both a harmful caterpillar and a beneficial adult. So these caterpillars are eating those tomato plants. Can you tell us what exactly is going on in the tomato plant when that happens?
Sure. So we talked about the one up here, and there had been one down here. It may have started to crawl away. But when a caterpillar bites the plant, say here or here, the damage causes increases in chemical defenses throughout the plant. We call this defense induction. So it makes more, even more, when it's attacked. And the idea is if it makes more, then it will keep more insects away. Of course, if it's a hornworm, that may not work so well, but it works for all the other insects that may be going after it. One other thing that happens, one of the defense responses, is that it releases more volatiles. So these
Volatiles?
this is chemistry also, but it's chemistry of things that can travel through the air.
So I can smell these tomato plants.
Yeah.
Are those volatiles I'm smelling?
Yes.
So they're odors.
They are odors,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
And plants are always releasing odors, and we're used to thinking about them and smelling them in flowers, for example. But in this case, the plant will make more of those volatiles, and those volatiles will actually travel around the plant and induce some of those defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think, Dr. Schultz, you know a little bit about volatiles because you were one of the people that discovered how they work.
Yeah, we discovered this way back in the 1980s. So the idea here is that some kind of signal goes from where the caterpillar is feeding to the rest of the plant, turns on these changes you're describing, including the emission of volatiles, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, volatiles is a fancy word for odors. And as it turns out, anytime a plant is stressed in a variety of ways, if you pinch it, if you cut it, if an insect bites it, almost any experience a plant has causes the plant to produce and throw into the air a whole bouquet of odors. Those odors are specific to whatever happened to the plant. So if it's a caterpillar, there's one set of odors. If it's a lawnmower, it's a different set of odors. And these odors indicate that something bad has happened to the plant. So it's widely said that the smell of mowing your lawn is the grass crying for help. And that is true because the volatiles have two important functions. One is they can travel to nearby plants and turn on the defenses there. So if nearby damage is happening, the nearby damage sends out a signal that helps protect nearby plants that are not yet attacked. That's pretty cool. Talking plants, we call it, you know. And the other thing that is very important that these volatiles do is that they attract bodyguards or helpful insects to the plant. This is one of the typical volatiles. It's the smell of green grass. Now that might seem not very special, but it's so special that you can buy it by the can, and it's used in perfumes because people really like it. It's used in food flavoring and to create pleasant odors. And again, it's a danger signal produced by plants. Those plants are not only talking to each other, they are sending out signals that tell the world that there is an insect on them, feeding on them and damaging them. You saw the caterpillar on the tomato plant here. While that caterpillar feeds, the entire plant is starting to produce an odor that says caterpillar here. And in fact, it says tomato hornworm here. It says what kind of caterpillar it is. When that happens, enemies of the caterpillar are attracted to the plant, and you can see one of them here. You may have seen this happen to your caterpillars in your garden. Those are cocoons of very, very tiny wasps called parasitoid wasps. You can see a picture of one in the lower right. You see how tiny it is? It's only a fraction of the length of the horn on the caterpillar. I mean, it's a really tiny, tiny moth. That moth flies to the caterpillar, and if it can get by the fighting of the caterpillar, which doesn't like this, of course, it injects eggs into the caterpillar. The eggs hatch into little larvae that are rather like maggots, and they eat the inside of the caterpillar pretty much until they run out of food, and then they emerge, pupate, and produce these cocoons. So each of those that you see there is the cocoon of a baby wasp that started off as an egg in the caterpillar and ate its way to happiness inside.
Whoa, that's a little gross. And it reminds me of Alien, the movie.
In fact, this biological phenomenon has been modeled in many, many science fiction stories, and the Alien series definitely took advantage of what happens here to design its xenomorphs. But this even gets fancier. There are some tiny wasps like the one we just showed, and you see a video of a caterpillar in which the larvae, the little maggots, are emerging having eaten the inside of the caterpillar. They're going to all come out through the sides of the caterpillar, chew their way out, and they spin cocoons on the leaf. This is a little different species. They've now spun cocoons, but now the caterpillar is spinning another cocoon over them. The caterpillar is spreading silk all over the enemies to protect them from their enemies.
Why would it do that?
Well, the enemies want it. And the caterpillar actually hangs around and fights off predators and parasites.
So it takes over the caterpillar brain?
Takes over the caterpillar brain and tells the caterpillar, we want you to protect us until we can come out as little wasps, which they will do in just a minute. There they are, and there they go.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
What a story.
Yeah, we're not too sure how this works, but it appears that the wasp larvae are able to take over the caterpillar brain and program it and give it instructions to protect the offspring and guard them.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is wild. I think there's another sci-fi film in there.
Oh, lots of them. Yeah.
All right.
So in order for this to happen, this is, by the way, very important. Little wasps like that are at least as abundant and are at least as many species as there are insects eating plants. And they do a huge job controlling the numbers of insects on plants. And we'll talk more about that. Or we did talk about that, didn't we?
A little bit.
Yeah. And they kill so many caterpillars so successfully that they really help us grow crops, because otherwise insects like those caterpillars would consume it all.
Wow. And insects like ladybugs help out too, right?
Right.
They are particularly like aphids.
And recent studies show that those odors even attract birds to a feeding insect, right?
To the buffet.
To the buffet, right? Yeah. So the plant is saying, over here,
Yes.
here's lunch, like that.
There's a whole lot going on that we have no idea because we're not able to smell the levels of the
Right.
chemicals that are causing this.
Well, some of them actually are familiar to us, but let's see if we can see what those are. Oh, yeah. So here's a field. Imagine you're the tiny little wasp, just a couple of millimeters long, and you're looking for your caterpillar in that mess. I mean, it's a lovely mess, but trying to find a caterpillar out there. Well, the plants help out by providing odors that tell our little wasps where to look. And many of the odors are actually quite familiar to us. You should recognize a lot of the smells you're familiar with here. All of these smells are, in one situation or another, signals that plants are sending to each other or to friends to come help them beat their herbivores. So next time you're walking through a field and you smell the different smells, especially when you walk through and walk on plants and so forth, remember, those are plants signaling for help.
Screaming for help?
Screaming for help, that's right, yeah.
Oh, dear.
So there's one last thing that is really peculiar. A lot of people work on, and we all like to understand better, and that is, how do these plants know they're being eaten?
Okay. Well, there is some damage that happens, right?
Sure.
If they're chewing insects, there's damage. And when they're sucking insects, there's some signals, and they move, the mouth parts move between the cells, but they still do a little bit of damage on the way in. But the plant senses that change, and it will send, the fragments of the cell walls that have been broken will be alarm bells, essentially, in a way that's kind of similar to what happens to us when we're damaged. Now, plants don't have a nervous system, so their nerves aren't immediately reporting what's happened, but they do send signals throughout the plant to say, I've been damaged, mount a response.
Can they tell it's an insect?
They can tell it's an insect some of the time. So we talked about these fragments, the damage, but they can also detect the vibrations from insect chewing and tell that there is an insect there, even if there actually isn't an insect there. Let me show you what I mean.
Yeah, this is something you discovered recently, right?
I did
Yeah,
with a collaborator. Yeah. So I'm the listening plant, if you're the talking plant guy.
There you go.
Yeah, but let me show you what I mean.
Oops. What is that I hear?
That's a caterpillar chewing on a leaf, and we've just made the vibrations it's causing audible to us. Look really closely, and you can see that leaf bouncing a little bit that the caterpillar is feeding on. And that red dot at the base of the leaf is where a cold laser, is making measurements. Can you turn? And then that cold laser can then it records every movement, and then we can take that movement and make a plant leaf move that way, but in the absence of the caterpillar.
So it's like you're playing the sound back to the leaf.
Yes. So we play it back, and when you do that, with all the other damage signals out of the way, not happening, the plant makes more chemical defenses.
And how about things like wind and so forth? I mean, they vibrate the leaves, right?
Yeah, and we checked with wind because maybe the plant's just responding to everything, right? But it didn't respond to wind. And we also played back another sound that's in the environment that has some similarities to the caterpillar vibrations, but doesn't have the rhythmic pattern. And we did that, the plant didn't respond. So that taught us that the plants have a selective sense of hearing for a real danger in their environment, and they have a reasonable, important response to this.
And they're getting a lot of information to make decisions with. There's the vibration.
Yeah.
There's the damage to the cells. And I guess spit is important too. There are signals in caterpillar spit, for example. In fact, a lot of scientists specialize on insect spit because plants can tell who the insect is that way, right?
Yeah, they can. They're all a little different. Can you imagine that on your name at a conference? Dr. So-and-so, spitologist.
Spitologist, right, exactly, yeah.
So plants have many ways to tell they're being damaged, but the vibrations move super fast, so it may turn out to be one of the fastest. So plants have evolved to detect and defend themselves against insects, and insects have evolved to avoid or detoxify the plant defenses. New and useful defenses and counter defenses made for greater success in lineages of plants and insects. Scientists think that this long contest is partly why we have so many different kinds of insects and plants. And if you've heard today, it's also why there are so many different kinds of plant chemicals that are useful to us.
Plants are literally chemical factories. They make hundreds of thousands of chemicals, and as Heidi pointed out, many of them are very important to us.
So we have insect-plant warfare to thank for a lot of what we like and use. We've enjoyed our time today and hope you have too. Join us next week, same time, same place, for our last presentation on insects are weird.
All kinds of crazy insects and the superhuman things they can do.
See ya.
See you next time.
Dr. Jack Schultz, Dr. Heidi Apple, thank you again for joining us and sharing the wonderful world of insects versus plants. And I will be looking forward to the even more weird world of insects next week right here at Imagination Station. Until then, thanks again.